Palace. Nicholas, pick up the story from there.
Indeed, I agree with all of Jackie's timings, Jonathan. We think at just about an hour's time, Mr. Major's car will come down and he will go through the right-hand gates of Buckingham Palace. Now, if you look across the Buckingham Palace there, just beyond the police horses, there's the archway there. The car will drive through there into the quadrangle. He will get out, go through what's called the King's Door, up the stairs and into the audience room, where he and the Queen will have a private meeting. We're not quite sure what they say, but it's probably awfully sorry, regrets and so on, a handshake. We gather Norma Major might just be there too. Mr. Major then comes out, he goes off down the Mall after a decent diplomatic interval, quarter of an hour or so. Mr. Blair will arrive, probably with Sherry, through the gate, through the archway into the quadrangle. He will go up into the room and the Queen will say to him, Mr. Blair, welcome and so forth, handshake, can you form a government? And I think Mr. Blair will at that point say yes.
Nicholas Owen, we will be back there when that happens. We guess that one thing is certain is that he will say yes when asked that question. Joined now by Neil Kinnock, the former leader of the Labour Party. You had an extraordinary moment this morning at about 5 o'clock when Tony Blair paid tribute to what you had done for the party, and there was a great roar, and you were clearly very moved by that.
Very, very much.
5 years ago, you were fighting back the tears. Today, you look like the happiest man that I've seen for a long, long time.
I am extremely happy. And 5 years ago, I really didn't have time for tears. I was much more inclined towards tears this morning, actually, just sheer tears of joy at a great victory for my dear friend and for the party that he's led brilliantly in these last 3 years.
Do you think, and of course there was, I don't mean the interlude, but you know what I mean, of John Smith, is this a straight line from what you were trying to do with the party, your battles with militants, your other battles, through to what Tony Blair now represents? Was this your objective as well?
Certainly it was. The great change that I had to make was in policy, but also in the way in which the party regarded itself. It had to regard the rest of the people of the country with more importance than its own internal division. That lesson had been learned by 1992, not quickly enough, not deeply enough to impress the electorate, and we therefore didn't win, narrowly, but we didn't win. John continued that very strongly, as you saw with the changes that he continued to try to make in the Labour Party. Tragically, he was taken from us. And then Tony took up the reins, and as I'd always known, because he was a close confidant of mine throughout all those years, steered a very, very straight course.
Now, you heard Alex Salmond earlier, who represents, in terms of economic and social policy, old Labour attitudes. He was saying, you didn't need to go this far. You're occupying now conservative territory. You've got very little room to manoeuvre, and implying that a lot of people are going to feel very let down when the kinds of things that they expect Labour to do, because of the constraints imposed on Labour by Tony Blair, won't be done.
The first thing I'd have to say is that Alex Salmond was appealing to you to use the term SNP to describe him, not others. And as long as you call it Sour Nationalist Party, I think that that would be most apposite. Secondly, of course, it isn't the constraints imposed by Tony Blair that the Labour government realistically has to face. It's the constraints imposed by the general condition of the economy, a short-term rise in performance, and in order to try and sustain that upward curve, there's going to have to be very careful management.
Neil,
and that's been very candidly acknowledged by Tony and by Gordon Brown and the rest of the party.
I understand that, but he has great eloquence. Everyone concedes that. He made some very powerful speeches today. He talks about imposing a special sort of responsibility, our power does. He talked in terms of one nation, of bringing people together, embracing everyone. Can you actually, or can he actually embrace the Richard Bransons, if you like, and the fat cats who have been at war historically with Labour on the one hand, and those who've missed out and who are at the bottom of the pile to which Labour traditionally has appealed? Can you actually bring them together without one or other saying, hey, we don't like this?
Tony's essential value is the value of community. He believes, as I do, that the only way in which individuals get real freedom is by being able to be part of a strong community. And I think, first of all, that is a healing message for a very wide spectrum. Secondly, of course, I wouldn't describe Richard Branson as a fat cat. He's a very rich man, but he's made it himself, and he hasn't taken in the way that some of the fat cats have.
I was careful to say that.
Sure, I understand that. But at the same time, Tony understands, as we have long understood, that in order to distribute wealth in justice, as the Labour Party certainly wants to, it first has to be produced. A climate for enterprise is therefore essential, sustained investment is essential, and as these 5 years pass, you will see a reallocation of prosperity, not meaningless, but simply meaningful, because the resources will become available without making great impositions of tax on any grouping in society.
Just one word, are you heading now back to Europe and your job as Commissioner again?
Oh, I shall certainly be doing that on Monday afternoon after I've spoken to a conference on transport in this country.
Thanks very much
Thank
for
you.
joining us, Neil Kinnock. We're going to take a break now, and after the break we'll be looking at the future for the Tories, how they recover. Douglas Hurd will be giving us his thoughts on what will happen and should happen now. And we'll be at the Scottish Assembly building in Edinburgh to discuss the battles ahead on devolution. Join us in a few minutes.
Take time out to discover new Viva Color, Weller's first permanent color with a color vitalizer. It uses ingredients found naturally in hair itself to vitalize your hair. The result? Lasting radiant color and brilliant shine. Put the life back into your hair. Add vitality to your life. Discover the secret with Viva Color, new from Weller.
Try your hand at gliding, or try your hand at gliding. Train in the morning, train in the morning. How about dining out, or dining out? Come for the castles, come for the castle. Stay for the drama, drama.
Well, security and protection are the main things. Plus, you're in a hot club. You want to feel dry and comfortable, and you don't want to have anything else in your mind. You want to be out having a good time. So I gave Always a go, and it worked amazingly. It really was a surprise.
Look, it's amazing how much these 3mm can absorb. The secret, the dry weave top sheet, and the ultra-absorbent core, which work together to lock away the liquid. The result? The pad stays fresh and dry. Proof that you are really protected.
And with Always, I am secure, I am protected, and I am comfortable. So that covers every aspect.
Relax, you're ultra-protected.
We're at DFS.
Let's see what people think.
What do you think of 5 years free credit?
It's great.
Fantastic.
And it's on everything.
Did you know anything you choose is free for the first 12 months?
The first 12 months, that's great.
It's absolutely free. Not even a deposit.
And what do you think of the price?
That's brilliant. Yeah, it's very good.
It's real leather, too.
And that's even better.
That's DFS.
This bank holiday time.
At Sidcup, New Malden, Croydon, Milton Keynes, Reading and South Ruislip.
Great value for money.
Do you see who I see?
Oh, it can't be. Can it? Good morning, Mr. C. Have you noticed how many cereals seem to look like Kellogg's these days? But they're not the genuine Kellogg's article, are they? That's because Kellogg's don't make cereals for anyone else, you know.
Excuse me, Mrs. K, but is that the,
The president certainly is. Runs the Golf Society. Splendid he does.
Morning. Morning.
Morning.
Because of the kind of work I do, and having clean, shiny hair is an absolute must for me. I'm a real fiddler when it comes to my hair. I push it behind my ears a lot. So if I've been working all day and I've fiddled with it a lot, I mean, that makes it dirty. I always wash my hair with Head & Shoulders dandruff shampoo every day.
pH-balanced Head & Shoulders clears dandruff, and it's mild enough to use as often as you want.
It's very touchable hair. You want to feel it because it looks so sort of healthy and shiny. I keep it nice and clean so I can fiddle with it afresh the next day.
Look at this.
Bleach will fix it.
What? Bleach on my new towel?
Don't worry, it's new Ace, the safest type of bleach for all your laundry.
Welcome back with the news that the bookies William Hill are offering odds of 4-1 already, 4-1 that Tony Blair will stay in Downing Street longer than Margaret Thatcher. And a bit of analysis from our analysts. 65 of the 160 Tory MPs so far returned to the House of Commons explicitly opposed a single European currency, demonstrating just how deep the gulf is in the Tory party on this issue, a thing that I will raise very soon with Douglas Hurd, the former Foreign Secretary, when he joins us in a moment. But now let's have a summary. Here, Labour's won. The majority is still there on 179. 629 of the 659 seats in, Labour on 417, the Conservatives on 160, Liberal Democrats on 41, and the rest, including the SNP, on 11. And here are some of the key results. Labour have gained Enfield Southgate, they've gained Basildon, the Liberal Democrats, have gained North Avon, and the SNP has gained Galloway, the SNP gaining Galloway from Ian Lang. And out, 3 cabinet members, Michael Porteau, Ian Lang, and Malcolm Rifkind. And William Walgrave and Michael Forsyth, and Tony Newton, 3 more. That's the 6 cabinet ministers that have gone. And 3 other leading figures in the party, or public figures in the party, Angela Rumbold, Sebastian Coe down in Falmouth, and Edwina Currie, who knew that she was going to go and told everyone so in advance. William Hague has said, I'm in favour of Mr Major staying on if he wishes to do so and doesn't want to discuss the leadership for so long as Mr Major wants to stay on, which suggests that he himself will be a leadership candidate when the time comes. Douglas Hurd, whom I'll be speaking in a moment, says it's not meltdown, more like a time for a change prevailed. We'll find out a bit more what he means by that soon. David Trimble says, and he of course is the leader of the Ulster Unionists, we've had an excellent relationship with Labour. We look forward to a new opportunity. Now we can go up to Islington outside Tony Blair's house to join Joe Andrews. Morning, Joe. You're looking... It looks a lovely morning out there. We've been inside the studio, so we don't know what the morning's like. But anyway, can you tell us what's going to happen?
The latest we hear is that the Blairs, Cherie and Tony Blair, are due to go to Buckingham Palace at about noon, leaving from here. Cherie will go with him to Buckingham Palace, the children will go to Downing Street, and then they'll all come back to Downing Street, and Cherie, Tony and the children will get their first look at that famous flat in the attic at Downing Street, where they're going to have to spend the next 5 years. There's then going to be a lunch for close family, and then the new Prime Minister will get down to work. We're told that he will only do the 2 or 3 top appointments. John Prescott is certain to be Deputy Prime Minister, and then in the next few days he'll get down to the next appointments. But we're told there will be no great bloodbath. He will more or less follow the shadow cabinet ratings as they are at the moment.
So those rumours that he was going to discard those who regarded on the left of his party, like Michael Meacher or Claire Short, and have a very early day of the long knives, and are false rumours, yes?
We're being told no early night or day of the long knives, no great bloodbath, very much what you see and what you know. Obviously there will be a few changes, and nobody here was prepared to commit themselves to precisely what those would be.
Joe Andrews, we'll be back with you in due course when you can tell us what's going to happen next, or indeed when Tony Blair leaves the House. Thanks very much. Now let's just look at, for a moment, the Tory predicament. Every record virtually has been broken. Politically, put it, Mike, in context for me first.
Well, they've got a hell of a problem ahead, have they not? I suspect that one of the things, of course, that's going to come straight onto the agenda is Europe. Now, I noted what Edwina Currie was saying. She said that the sooner the party gets its brain around the idea of being in Europe and being committed to Europe, the better it will be. Of course, it's not, though, going to be Mrs. Currie's extreme enthusiasm, perhaps, but it seems to me that the party has got to come to terms with, and perhaps it now, the shock of what has happened will make it come to terms with, John Major's view that you are in, but you work for the sensible kind of Europe that he wanted so much to promote.
And can you, Alistair, quickly just give us some figures or thoughts about the kind of mountain that the Tory party now has to climb if it's going to return to office at some stage?
Certainly. 2 very simple yardsticks. The overall swing from the Conservatives to the Labour Party last night was 10.3%. But we assess now, on the basis of all of the information that we have, for the Conservative Party to seriously contemplate getting back into power, they will have to achieve a swing of 12%, a 1945 size of swing again, if the Tories are to form a majority in a future House of Commons. A staggering challenge.
We're joined by Douglas Hurd. Good morning, and very nice to see you here, even on this morning of grief for you. You must be jolly glad that you're not an MP.
I like electioneering. I slightly missed it. It's not quite the same when you're doing it for other people.
But the situation that your party inherits this morning could hardly be more grim.
Yes, it is grim. I think that's fair. It's not a meltdown. A meltdown is what happened to the Canadians when the Canadian Conservatives ended up with 2 votes. But I think grim is fair. It's a wilderness. We're in the wilderness.
And to what do you principally attribute that? I know you can't have one simple reason. There are probably a combination. But if you had to sort of identify the core of the matter, what is it?
It's 2. It's time for a change, which obviously is very powerful. Nearly got Labour in 92, but there was just a fear of Labour then, which survived and has disappeared now. And secondly, our own incoherence, the incoherence of the parliamentary party. It's self-indulgence, it's lack of discipline. And I agree with what Michael just said about that.
But what can you... We've just... David Butler and Colin Rallings at the back there have been doing some number crunching on the basis of the views taken by the MPs, of the Tory MPs who returned to the House of Commons. 65 out of the 160 were amongst those who explicitly said they would not sign a single currency. How do you reconcile those wings of the party? How can it be done? Can it be done?
Well, I'm not a fan of a single currency, and I think it's clear that even under a Labour government we won't go in the first wave. The question will arise later, maybe in the end of this Parliament, maybe the beginning of the next, if others go ahead, if it succeeds, if we begin to lose blood because we're outside. Those are 3 big ifs. But if that were to happen, then these people would certainly change their minds, because their constituents would say, oh, what about our jobs? Cut the political cackle.
But there is bound to be, is there not, warfare. If you have warfare when you're in government that practically gives people the impression that the party is destroying itself, when you're in opposition, it's going to be even more difficult.
Well, unless a lesson has been learned, and that would be my hope. I mean, when you go into opposition, you have different voices, of course, and there will be controversy over the next few weeks. But actually, the option of going further into the wilderness, of saying we lost because we didn't satisfy our own supporters, our own activists, we lost because we weren't nationalist enough, we didn't wrap ourselves sufficiently in the Union Jack, because we weren't beastly enough about Europe, that option, I think the party will reject. That's what Michael Foot did in Mirror Image in 1980. He led his troops further into the wilderness, and that wasn't sensible from his point of view, or actually from the country.
Now, in order to make sure that you don't go further into the wilderness, would it be helpful, in your view, if John Major stayed on for a while?
Yes, I think it's very hard to give him that advice. I mean, in a way, why the hell should he? He's more popular than his party. The high point of the campaign was his broadcast, when he cut away from his advisors and did his own thing. He raised the whole thing. So I don't think he's under any obligation. But actually, I think a lot of Tories, Conservatives this morning, will be hoping that he will see us through this immediate period. I don't think one can expect him to go on through the life of this Parliament. I hope he will time it so that he sees us through this immediate period, which will certainly be difficult.
When you say immediate period, a month, 2 months, 3 months?
I don't know, but I should have thought months. But I don't know. That really is for him. I would leave that absolutely to his judgment. He's got no personal axe to grind.
Douglas Hurd, thank you very much indeed
for
joining us and coming in here. We're going to continue with that theme later with Stephen Dorrell, who will be in here. But meanwhile, we'll just take a brief break.
Here we are in this bustling neon metropolis, Hong Kong. I've had a fantastic morning with Captain Ping and his crew, so now I'm cooking lunch. Bit of a risk, but you can't go wrong with Uncle Ben's. Stir-fried prawns in sweet and sour sauce. What's the verdict, Captain Ping?
Very good. Such a flavors full of mystery.
Uncle Ben's sauces, perfect every time.
It's going down a treat.
He's saving to take us on holiday. I'm putting money away for a conservatory. Oh, that would be nice. But even though we're both saving, the interest we get from our building society isn't as high as we'd like. So we've decided to give our money to you.
Great. With us, you'll both keep your separate accounts,
And we'll pay interest at the rate the money would have earned if it was combined in one account. So in other words, I can't lose. Exactly. I better dig out my gardening gloves.
With Direct Line, you can pool your savings with up to 5 other people. And while you all have your own separate accounts, everyone earns interest at the rate payable on the total amount. Call 0181 667 1121 now.
If viruses were visible, here's what a sneeze could look like. Anything hands touch can pass on colds or sickness. Hands pass viruses to your eyes or mouth. But now, using new Detox surface spray regularly helps wipe out viruses wherever hands touch. Now I can shed this get-up. Protect your family from nasty viruses. Use new Detox surface spray. Reach for the sword.
The inventors of the Hoover cleaner have reinvented it for today. Nowadays, many of us suffer from dust mite allergies, which most vacuums can't deal with effectively. The 1400-watt Hoover Pure Power S-Class with 99.99% filtration sucks up 40% more dust mites and allergen particles than even our most modern Hoover. Then the Pure Power 7-stage filtration system seals them in completely. There's simply no escaping. The Pure Power of Hoover.
Fiat dealers have great finance programs on all Fiat cars. Call up ITV Teletext page 348 for more information.
Welcome back to Election 97 on ITV. We're told by Joe Andrews, who we were talking to before up at Islington outside Tony Blair's house, that President Clinton has rung Tony Blair in his car and said, well done, an amazing result. And he said he'd been watching the results on American television. And just on the European question and the Tories, which we were pursuing earlier with Douglas Hurd, the evidence that we have from our analysis is that the Eurosceptics did no better than their colleagues because of their Euroscepticism. Last night, Theresa Gorman was saying that it was Europe, 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 and if everyone had been anti-Europe, then the Tories would have been done much better. In fact, she suffered the 8th largest swing against the Tories to Labour in her safe seat of Billericay. We can now go to Conservative Central Office and Stephen Dorrell. Good morning, Mr. Dorrell.
Good morning.
Do you weep, cry, or say we've got a future? What do you say?
Well, first of all, of course, I, if not weep, certainly feel very sorry about the many, many friends who lost their seats last night, people who'd given real service to their constituents, to the Conservative Party, and most importantly, to our country. So I feel very sorry about that. But then I think it's essential for those who have been elected as Conservative MPs to keep faith with the people who voted for us and the people who worked for us, and to ensure that we start now to rebuild the Conservative Party as the authentic voice of the centre-right majority that I still believe represents the key centre ground of British politics.
And what does that mean? Hasn't your ground been occupied by Tony Blair? Effectively, he's taken over the centre ground, hasn't he? Well, with a mass of the British people behind him.
He's certainly won, and I congratulate him on his victory. I still believe that when his government is tested on the anvil of having to make key decisions, then we shall find that they haven't thought through the detail of how they're going to deliver the objectives that they've set themselves. They've unleashed a huge bow wave of expectation. I don't believe they'll be able to deliver that, and I think that it's obviously a key task of the Conservative Party in the Parliament that is soon to meet, to ensure that we call that government to account, to ensure that its road.
Okay, but
where
look,
it falls short, that's drawn to people's attention, and also that as a party, we set out our own clear-sighted alternative, which speaks to that constituency that I referred to.
But with respect, Steve Dorrell, that's the kind of thing you'd be bound to say. You have to say that. That's what it ought to do. But how on earth do you do it from the present predicament? With your party already publicly fighting itself over Europe, you've got former grandees like Lord Tebbit saying it's been a lousy campaign, and if only John Major got it right on Europe, you might well still be in power. You've got other parts of the party saying the Eurosceptics are destroying us and are lunatics. How on earth do you set about doing what you've failed to do for the last 3-4 years?
I think that, first of all, the people who've been working for Conservative candidates up and down Britain over the last 6 weeks will, not only will they expect it, but they will apply pressure, they will argue with their elected representatives in order to make certain that what we have is a period of sober reflection. The Conservative Party has had many ups and downs. It's a very long-standing political tradition. And obviously last night was a very bad night for the Conservative Party.
Douglas Hurd was saying to me just now, you probably didn't hear him, he was saying he hoped, you did, but he hoped Major would stay on for a while, John Major, but he didn't expect him to stay on for long. You couldn't wish that on him. When he goes, are you one of those who's going to stand for what you describe as these centre-right beliefs publicly and say, I'm prepared to put my money where my mouth is and run for the job?
I understand why people go on asking those questions, but I really do think that is a secondary question. The primary question for the Conservative Party after an event like this general election is to clear its collective mind on the ideas, the values, the principles for which it is going to fight. Okay. And that is what we should be addressing our mind to, not the question, the essentially secondary question of who holds which office on the front bench.
And your task is to save your throat before it gets much worse. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Dorrell. Well, from Scotland to Cornwall and all points between, the political map of Britain has undergone a radical change. ITN's Terry Lloyd was up early to talk to people in the East Midlands to see how they feel about waking up under a Labour government once more.
The start of a new day and the beginning of a fresh political era. The country had made its choice, and there appeared to be few surprised faces come daybreak. Over breakfast, families read and listened to the latest figures, which added to the Labour landslide. The exit polls had predicted a massive majority. The first additions to reach rural newsagents confirmed the Tories had suffered their longest night. In Cotgrave near Nottingham, postman Steve Bunting rose at 5 to check the facts, then went to work with a smile. 4 years ago, he was a miner at one of the country's most productive pits, but the Conservatives closed it, then destroyed it.
They closed my pit. I nearly lost my daughter and my grandson to health cutbacks. That's the reason I wanted them out. I'm even more secure in my own job, because I believe they'd have privatised post office if they got in again.
The early morning feelings were echoed throughout the village, where the MP is former Chancellor Kenneth Clarke.
It's great news. We've waited years for this, since the Tories shut the pit, you know, it's revenge.
Well, I wasn't surprised, not in the slightest. I think it was all the sleaze allegations that's done it for him this time.
A lot of the bitterness towards the Conservative Party in this area is to be expected. This is all that remains of Cotgrave Colliery. But it's not just mining families who've welcomed the Labour Party to power.
Although the country's been doing very well, me as a farmer, they've done nothing for me. I mean, BSE is a prime example.
It may be pastures new for Labour and the electorate, but the public clearly wants to give them a chance. Terry Lloyd in Nottingham for election 97.
Labour also made significant inroads into the Tory heartlands of southern England. One Conservative seat there, Winchester, is yet to declare its result. But while we wait for that result, Robert Hall has been getting reaction to the national picture. Robert.
Well, Jonathan, the atmosphere in Winchester this morning is electric. The count here, as you said, still going on. Shoppers busily spreading the news of that excitement overnight. We've been gathering reactions since first thing this morning. Can I speak to you first of all? You're a Labour supporter.
Yes.
What was your reaction when you heard what was
Excellent. I've been watching it all night as it's come through, and all you see on the telly all night long was the Labour being voted in, and it's a good day for everybody.
Is it what you expected?
Yeah, Not the actual overall result. I expected them to win, but not as the way they did.
How about you, sir? Let's talk to you next to you there. What were you expecting?
Well, as a staunch Conservative, I hope they get back in. And I hope Jerry Malone gets in when they count today.
But overall, what a picture.
But overall, there's no doubt, right across the country, it was time for change. And I'm quite sure if Tony Blair continues with the Conservative policies he's picked up, then we're in for a pretty good
Do you think that's
time.
what did it? Not a bad campaign, it was just overall a feeling of time
I think the time had come for everyone.
Let's talk to the young lady at the back. Do you think you were a first-time voter?
Yes, I am indeed.
We're just going to St Ives. This is the seat that the Liberal Democrats almost certainly get, given their performance.
Faulkner, Michael Patrick,
Referendum Party.
3,714. Vegan, Christopher.
Labour Party.
8,184. Garnier, Patricia Elizabeth.
UK Independence Party.
567. George Andrew Henry, 23,966.
Liberal Democrat.
There's the certain victory.
Hitchens, William James,
Independent.
a.k.a. Nirdosh Uday, a.k.a. Axoka, 71. Kevin John,
Radical Alternative.
These are the other small minor parties. The winner here, incidentally, is a Cornish speaker, and he's supported by Cornish nationalists. Not many of those. Here's the Tory.
796.
So the Liberal Democrats, another of their gains, they're totting up in the West Country, win St Ives. It was the easiest one for them to win. Here is the result. A majority of 7,000 for the Liberal Democrats, for Andrew George, the Conservatives in second place, and the swing from Conservative to Liberal Democrat there, 8.1%. Very much the kind of swing that they've been getting. Here's the change in the share of the vote. Liberal Democrats up 4.4, Conservatives down 11.8. And the Labour Party just down a little, but they don't actually play a big part in that part of Cornwall. So there we are with that result, and now it's time to go over. We can go to Dermot Monaghan with some news. Dermot.
Thanks, Jonathan. And the main news is, of course, the election. Tony Blair, the new Prime Minister, has declared a new dawn for Britain after inflicting a humiliating defeat on John Major and the Tories. This morning, Mr Blair is preparing to move into Downing Street. His landslide election victory is certain to transform the face of British politics. After a night of political drama, this is the state of the parties so far. Labour has 417 seats, the Conservatives 160, the Liberal Democrats 41 and others 11, giving Labour a predicted majority of 179. It's a personal triumph for Mr Blair. The share of the vote for Labour is 44.7%. The Conservatives have 31% and the Liberal Democrats 17%. That's a swing from the Conservatives of 10.4%. 6 cabinet ministers lost their seats, including Michael Portillo and Malcolm Rifkind. One independent one, Martin Bell, beat Neil Hamilton in Tatton. Well, Jennifer Nadel now reports on a remarkable Labour victory and what the future holds for the Conservatives.
The Prime Minister-elect back at his Islington home this morning after his historic victory. When he emerges again, it will be to travel to Buckingham Palace to be asked by the Queen to form the next government. Tony Blair's majority is the largest ever won by a Labour leader. He's about to become the youngest Prime Minister since 1812. At his Sedgefield constituency last night, he expressed his gratitude.
We are a great country. The British people are a great people. There is no greater honour than to serve them, and serve them we will. Thank you.
Back at Downing Street early this morning, John Major.
Are you staying as party leader?
Giving no clues to his future, he's seen the number of Conservative MPs halved. The removal men have already started work. At Huntingdon last night, he conceded defeat.
Tonight, we have been comprehensively defeated. We will listen to the voice of the electorate. We will consider what has been said to us. I think we must reflect upon it. I know that we will.
He's seen 6 of his cabinet colleagues lose their seats, among them Michael Portillo, until now a potential leadership candidate.
A truly terrible night for the Conservatives. I would have wished to have been part of rebuilding it inside the House of Commons. I can't now do that, but I would like to do whatever I can from the wings to help rebuild a great party which has a great future.
Labour, 29,000.
Across the country, Conservative seat after Conservative seat fell to Labour, among them Basildon, former bedrock of Tory support. And in Tatton, Martin Bell trounced former Minister Neil Hamilton.
That we are the people of England, and we have not spoken yet.
For the Liberal Democrats, cause for celebration. Paddy Ashdown led his party to its own mini landslide and its best result for more than half a century.
Fighting now to be the cornerstone, the rock upon which we can build a new and modern constitution for our country that will begin to rebuild the bridge between the government and the governed and bring about, ladies and gentlemen, bring about, colleagues, what I believe will be a parliament of historic reform in this country in the years ahead.
And in Wales and Scotland, the Tories have been totally ousted. One former MP described it as like being hit by a tidal wave. For Labour, last night's celebrations seem set to continue, as Tony Blair prepares to form the first Labour government for 18 years. Jennifer Nadel for Election 97.
And that's it from me. Now back to Jonathan in the Election 97 studio.
Thanks, Dermot. And now we can go to Downing Street again with Jackie Ashley. I think we're waiting to hear that John Major's coming out pretty soon. Yes, Jackie?
That's right, Jonathan. We expect him any minute now. A microphone has been brought up just behind me here. John Major is going to come out and make a brief statement. He'll not be taking questions, we're told. He'll then get into his car, which is revving up here. The driver's already in. That's been packed with various bags and a suit carrier for the last half hour. Other boxes have been taken out and carried to other cars down the road. So it is very imminent now. The only other piece of news I have for you is that we understand Tony Blair will stop his car at the end of Downing Street and he will walk up, meeting a group of supporters who will be allowed in later on.
There'll be a mass of, I mean, it's the usual security problem, isn't it? It's not like the old days when it could be packed either side. Doors opening again, the doors opening and closing all the time. Every time one thinks looking over your shoulders, it must be John Major coming out.
I think any minute now, Jonathan, he will be coming out.
Have you got a sense from talking to people around there what the mood is in there amongst his staff, those people who he's worked with, who work for him?
No, it's all very businesslike. They all understand there's a job to be done. They're going about it very efficiently. The press are all being shepherded about and told what to do, told what's happening. People are moving things in and out, up and down the street. A group of cleaners have been in. Interestingly and rather poignantly, I don't know if you can see, but all the first floor windows have been open all this morning. It's a bit like a holiday house when you change over the tenants. They're obviously cleaning out the house, giving it a good airing. So everyone's going about their business in a fairly sort of orderly way, and they're aware that there is a job to be done and that an orderly changeover is going to happen now.
We know that there are a huge number of journalists surrounding Tony Blair. Is there a large contingent of international media facing you, as it were, looking from our angle?
There are a huge number, Jonathan. Just looking at them briefly, I should say there's well over 300, and a good number are certainly foreign journalists. There is obviously huge international interest in this story here today. I don't know if you can hear the gentleman just to my right is speaking away in German. A Japanese man is just about 3 more feet away. So, yes, immense international interest here.
Test the concentration, too. Jackie, we'll come back to you as soon as John Major emerges. Meanwhile, Nicholas Owen is outside Buckingham Palace. Nicholas.
Yes, indeed. Well, a bit of I can only describe it as holiday atmosphere, Jonathan, because as you can see, there are an enormous number of people here, but I think the vast majority are tourists, quite a lot of them saying in various languages what is going on, but quite a sense of expectation building up now. We do expect John Major down here in, well, what about 22 minutes' time if everything runs according to schedule. And then, as we said earlier on, something like, an hour or so after that, Mr. Blair will come along. And it's interesting that, you know, when Mr. Major hands in his resignation to the Queen, before Mr. Blair comes in to say he can form a government, we have no Prime Minister for a short time.
That's right, until the non-kissing of hands takes place.
That's right. No actual kissing of hands. We gather just a handshake.
Thank you. We'll go back to Islington now, to Joe Andrews. Has no movement there. People smoking cigarettes unhealthily behind you, I can see.
Yes, that's the press. There are about 200 people here. They're not tourists here. They are local Islington people who want to see the Prime Minister, who lives in the street round the corner from them. Tony Blair will go to the palace, we're told, in less than an hour from here. We're also told that Jonathan Powell is going to be taken to Downing Street with him, and Alistair Campbell.
Jonathan Powell is his Chief of Staff, or has been his Chief of Staff.
Indeed, and will go probably as Principal Private Secretary. Alistair Campbell will go as the Press Secretary. We're also told that President Clinton spoke to Mr. Blair last night on the phone, congratulated him, told him it was an amazing result, and also told him that he'd been following the election on American television.
Many people thought, of course, that the campaign organised and run by Labour had great similarities with that run by the Democrats that took President Clinton into office both times.
I'm sure that the Labour people here would be quick to point out that theirs had particularly British elements to it, but I think that that's certainly true.
Absolutely. I think we can go back down to Downing Street. Now let's go down to Downing Street and see what's happening down there with Jackie. There's the regulation policeman outside number 10 wearing his black jacket, and there is Jackie Ashley coming rapidly into focus in great close-up, Jackie. Sorry, I came to you too quickly. You were thinking and finding out.
I was just clearing the shot there, Jonathan, because we understood him to be coming out. Every few seconds, a great flurry goes through the crowd. All the photographers start to click, and it turns out not to be Mr. Major, but it really is only a matter of minutes now, because he has got to make his statement, get into the car, and head off to the palace. So we expect him very imminently now.
Here is the view looking down over Buckingham Palace into the central courtyard, I think. And it's Whitehall, isn't it? There we see Downing Street, Whitehall, and the helicopter poised over number 10. Jackie, carry on telling us what's happening, and you can tell us when the Prime Minister, as he still is, emerges.
Jackie, can you go to your left slightly? No, right.
There we are. That is the back of Downing Street, I think, from St James's Park. Mike.
That's the garden there, and the cabinet room just on the corner. So we can see there the picture's breaking up just a little bit, and that's the actual street. The car parked just round the front.
Here we are down the front, still waiting, Jackie.
Jonathan, what I can see is just down the road now, a lot of the staff have come out and they've assembled halfway down Downing Street. I think probably he will at least give them a wave. I'm sure he's meeting and saying goodbye to a lot of the staff inside as well. Another great flurry from the cameras here, but no, it's yet another false alarm.
Well, it's a big... it's easy to forget. This is a very big, poignant moment in a man's life when they've held the highest office of state and they are leaving, and they've had the huge burden of responsibility. He said to his party the other day, didn't he, love me or loathe me, allow me to lead you, in effect, he said in the context of Europe, the huge burden of office. And now he has to say goodbye to the people who've supported him during that period. Anyone with an ounce of understanding of power has to also understand what it is to be John Major at this moment.
They're now gathering in the windows behind me, Jonathan. I don't know if you can get a shot of that, but obviously a lot of the staff, about 90 or so, we understand, are inside at the moment.
Yes, we can see them there looking out of the window.
For a last goodbye. John Major will have said goodbye to them inside, and they'll be looking out now for their last glimpse as he gets into the car.
You remember the moment in 1990 when Margaret Thatcher left under rather different circumstances, when it was clear that she couldn't hold the leadership in the leadership election, and John Major took over, and she left. And she looked back in through the window, and there was tears came to her eyes.
Indeed there was. I don't think we'll find that from John Major this morning. Perhaps Norman may be feeling a little more emotional, I don't know, but I think John Major will act with the dignity that we've seen right through the night, through this defeat.
He has. He looked pretty emotional for a moment inside Central Office in the early hours of the morning, when he spoke very quietly and very gently to his staff. It seemed to me rather like a sort of as if they were his family almost, the big Tory family inside Central Office, and he was leaving them, essentially.
That's right, and it's no different for the Downing Street staff, except that they will stay on, and that within a matter of hours, they'll now be working for Tony Blair. So having worked for John Major for so long, they will immediately transfer their allegiances and they'll then be working for the new Prime Minister.
Let me just pause there, Jackie, and we'll come straight back to you. But Sir David Steele is sitting patient here watching this. You've had political power. You must have some sense, I want to talk to you about the Liberal Democrats soon, but you must have some sense of what it must mean for John Major, this.
I think he's been facing it for some time. I mean, he's not an idiot, and he must have realized that they were going to lose. I think he fought a very brave campaign. It was interesting that the two main broadsheet newspapers in Scotland on polling day both had quite sympathetic editorials, although were against him, and that he was described as a decent and steady man leading a rabble of a party. And I think that's the verdict that most people will have, whether they supported him or not in this election.
He certainly led the campaign absolutely from the front. And
yes.
Michael, I mean, he went, as they say, almost off message so far as the plan, and picked up, for instance, Europe, picked up the Constitution and said, this is the country, it has to be united only if you vote for me. It clearly didn't wash, but it nonetheless was his campaign.
Well, I'm not so certain about that. I think part of the problem of the whole campaign that at one day it was John Major's campaign because they wanted to deal with the particular problem of Europe, but another day it wasn't his campaign. And as I was saying last night, the great mystery was why they didn't go with the economy, the economy, the economy. And simply
as Ken Clarke was telling us.
As Ken Clarke was telling us. And it was not a very focused campaign. And I know, because I've been told, that there was a good deal of argument when sometimes the Prime Minister said, for heaven's sake, we're going to do it my way today. Next day, it wasn't done that way.
We were talking about Lady Thatcher coming out of here in 1990. Her press secretary has said on her behalf that she is hugely disappointed by Labour's landslide, but has no plans to make any further statements. It'd be quite surprising if Lady Thatcher at some stage or another doesn't make a further statement.
Well, I think she probably will want to say her piece. She usually does. Incidentally, what normally happens is that as the Prime Minister comes down the hall, walks the way down, all the staff line up and give him a round of applause. And I suspect, well, of course, there won't be that many staff for Mr. Blair going in. It's usually quite emotional. You can see him coming down the hall, and everybody gives him a last round of applause as he comes out.
Well, even in 1992, of course, when he was victorious, he came down the hall with Chris Patton. They came down the hall, and the staff there clapping, and he stopped and talked to them. It was a moment of euphoria. Yeah. Lord Archer has said, if you go into an election divided, he is one of those who takes this view, the British people will not thank you. I begged the party to get together, but there were elements that would not listen, which may suggest Lord Archer isn't actually as influential as he sometimes would like to be.
Well, I think this has partly been the problem because some of the people on the edge, you know, the voices coming in, sometimes they've been helpful, but sometimes they haven't. I mean, there were these devastating interventions by Lord Tebbit at the most unhelpful moments when things were plainly not going very well before the campaign started.
But this is what happens, isn't it, David Steele, when a party is seriously divided, any party, any political group, in the end, people in politics, on the whole, they do believe things quite strongly. And if they can't keep it together, the consensus, they will go AWOL.
That's right. I mean, I think the Conservatives were going to lose anyway, even with the economy, simply because the mood of the country was to have a change. But I think that the disastrous campaign has led to this complete landslide. I think they would have gone anyway, but they've gone with disastrous consequences.
We're now going up to Berwick, Alan Beath's seat. He's very certain, I guess, to hold
19,007. Brannan Paul, the Labour Party candidate, 10,965. Dodds Ian Campbell, UK Independence Party, 352. Herbert Nick, Conservative, 10,056. Lambton, the Honourable Edward Richard, the Referendum Party candidate, 1,423. And that the undermentioned person has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency, Alan James Beath.
There's no surprise there. The Liberal Democrats' deputy leader, who's won that seat in the 1973 by-election, has held on, upping the Liberal Democratic score in the House of Commons by one. His majority, 8,042. Very little swing, slight swing against him, in fact. Liberal Democrat to Labour of 1.1%. A tiny, tiny change. Alan Beath is, David Steele, a doughty member of the party, back in there yet again.
I was there at the by-election count, and his majority was 73, so I reckon this is quite a considerable improvement.
The 73 by-election, 73 majority he has.
73, or two figures anyway, I may not have got it quite right, but it was of that order, and so a majority of several thousand was great.
I think we might, while we're waiting for this to happen, we'll go straight to John Major, of course, in the Council. Just let me ask you a couple of things about this Liberal Democrat surge. It is extraordinary, and it is true, isn't it, that you really didn't think, because I spoke, like we all do, off the record to leading Liberal Democrat figures. No one ever thought it'd be anything like this.
No, I wouldn't have put money on as high a figure as this, but I did write, if I may remind you, in the middle of the campaign myself, saying that I thought, from the evidence of my own travels around the country, that if the tactical voting habit was going to take hold, then we could, I said, have, with no increase in the popular vote, get a considerable increase in seats. In fact, we've gone down, I think, 1% in the popular vote, and yet we've scored magnificently in seats. Now, that shows that this has been a very, very professional campaign, right from Paddy Ashdown downwards. It's been very well targeted. It has really paid off. When you think back to 83, when Roy Jenkins and I managed to scrape up 26% of the popular vote, 10% more than now, and yet we
700,000 votes only behind the Labour Party.
Yes, exactly, and we only got 23 seats for it. So this has really been a triumph in comparison.
It suggests almost it might be better not to have proportional representation, but have a very powerful Labour Party and you get more seats.
No, I tell you this, I think this advances the cause of proportional representation. I mean, look at the situation in Scotland. The Tories now have no seats for all the votes that they undoubtedly still have in Scotland. How are they, I mean, how is the Scottish Grand Committee going to operate? We're going to be the official opposition. I mean, the case for PR surely must now dawn on the Conservatives as well.
Well, Paddy Ashdown in the early hours was making the constitutional pitch very strongly.
Yes.
Are the Liberal Democrats stronger because of this huge Labour majority, despite your strength, or are you weaker?
No, I think we're stronger because I've sat in the House of Commons among 6 as a parliamentary party, and frankly there's all the difference in the world between a parliamentary party of 6 or a dozen or even 15 or 20 and a really serious body in the House of Commons of 45 seats. I hope Michael will agree with this as an onlooker. This cannot just be ignored as a sort of minor irritant in a two-party system. It is now definitely a three-party system. The procedures of the House will have to change. Something will have to be done about the Scottish Grand Committee. We're going to be legislating on constitutional issues, and the Conservatives are in a hopeless position.
Alistair, you wanted to come in.
Shirley Williams actually predicted that the result might be close to this. She seemed to think that it would be up in that region. But one thing that struck me as intriguing was the way to which some of the national newspapers, the efforts that they went to point out precisely where that tactical voting should take place. Huge spreads in the Observer and the Independent on Sunday, the weekend before voting. And it's perfectly clear from places like Sheffield, Hallam, which you'd never have dreamt of, David, I don't think, that the Liberal Democrats did it and did it with huge success.
Just to remind everyone what we're doing at the moment, if you're watching this, we're waiting for John Major to come out of Downing Street on his way to Buckingham Palace. He's due there in about 10 minutes' time, so he's going to be out in just a moment. Meanwhile, we're graced by the presence of Sir David Steele, and we're talking about this extraordinary Liberal Democrat result. And Mike, you wanted something to say.
I was something else was going through my thoughts going through my head. You actually have to sit, of course, on the same side of the House now as the smaller rump of the Tory party. I mean, I suppose you would really rather prefer to sit on the other side.
Well, you see, there will be some issues in which we're cooperating with the government, and the constitutional changes we've already agreed. I mean, there's going to be reform of the House of Lords, there's going to be devolution to Scotland, there's going to be a Bill of Rights, a Freedom of Information Act. What else?
Referendum on
the referendum on PR. I mean, all of these things we shall be actually in support of the government. But I think that
they're going to do it regardless of whether Liberal Democrats want it or
yes,
not.
But I suspect
you're in the slipstream.
I think we may not be in the slipstream. I suspect we may be something of a spur to get on with some of these issues, which perhaps the Labour Party, with a very big bloated majority, might feel a bit lazy about.
And there are some that think that if Tony Blair really believes that there is a sea change and that you embrace the whole of the nation, that he could say, let's have a partnership politics, let's genuinely have partnership politics, on the grounds that if you could put something together, however well the Tories did, it would be very difficult to put that centre-left coalition out of office.
I think he's already said that, and I mean by that, he doesn't mean by that any form of coalition or anything of that kind, but simply that where on broad issues we are agreed, we should mobilise the parliamentary majority and parliamentary procedures to get these things done.
Can you imagine the Liberal Democratic Party having given up on equidistance, going back under any circumstances, now that essentially you are somewhat on some things to the left of the Labour Party, ever working again with the Tory Party?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more likely we may pick up bits of the Tory Party as it splits.
Jackie Ashley's got some updating for us, I think. Jackie.
Yes, we're waiting any moment now, Jonathan. What I can tell you is that this car, this bulletproof car that he's going to get into, is actually the old Prime Minister's car. Tony Blair has now been given the new one. That's the green one. It's a couple of years newer than this one, so it's a sign of how quickly things can change.
It's pretty rough, isn't it?
It is a rough old trade. I can also tell you that out at the back entrance of Downing Street, to my right here, there's a big removal van. Michael Gerson oversees removals, it says, so who knows?
He's not getting as far away as that.
But those are the same people who moved out Mrs. Thatcher, if you remember, when she was moving out from Downing Street. So they've clearly got a contract on the job here.
One is always fascinated by this process of people, the way in which our democracy works, but it is pretty ruthless. Nonetheless, it is very, very clear. At one moment, a man is Prime Minister and has all the trappings of power. The next moment, someone else has it and he is gone.
It is ruthless.
And I... No?
No.
Thought that was it?
That was
a removal van.
That was a removal van,
yes.
man.
We have been seeing an awful lot of people coming in and out, carrying boxes, bags, and very much as if you or I were moving out in a bit of a hurry and hadn't managed to get all our things packed into suitcases or proper crates. It really is quite poignant to see it.
It certainly is. There they are, taking all the furniture and belongings that the majors have accumulated up there.
And here we are
now. He's coming out now and will address the nation through those microphones.
Good morning. I said most of what I wished to say when I had the opportunity of speaking last evening, but perhaps there are just one or two things that it would be appropriate to add this morning. It has been an immense privilege to serve as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom over the last 6.5 years. It's a privilege that comes to very few people, and it's a very precious privilege indeed. I hope as I leave Downing Street this morning that I can say with some accuracy that the country is in far better shape than it was when I entered Downing Street. The economy is booming, interest rates low, inflation low, unemployment falling, the growth pattern is well set, the health service is expanding, the education service is improving, and the crime statistics are falling. All of those, I think, are benevolent improvements in the interests of all the people of this country. I believe that the incoming government, to whom I repeat my warm congratulations upon their success, the incoming government will inherit the most benevolent set of economic statistics of any incoming government since before the First World War. I hope very much in the interest of the whole British nation that they're successful in retaining this economy in the future. If I may, I would like to clear up one area of speculation that I know has been abroad a little over the last few days. I have been a Member of Parliament for 18 years. I've been a member of the government for 14 years, a member of the Cabinet for 10 years, and Prime Minister since 1990. When the curtain falls, it's time to get off the stage, and that is what I propose to do. I shall therefore advise my parliamentary colleagues that I believe that it would be appropriate for them to consider the selection of a new leader of the Conservative Party to lead the party through opposition during the years that lie immediately ahead. This will necessarily take a little while to organise. Parliament must meet, and the members of Parliament must make their own consideration of this matter. Naturally, I shall remain at the service of the party during what I hope will be a reasonably brief interregnum. I'd just like, if I may, to add one final thought. During the 6.5 years that I have been in Downing Street, there have been innumerable personal kindnesses from huge numbers of people, many of whom I have never met and never heard from except by way of their individual kindness. I'd like to take this opportunity, if I may, of extending my thanks to them and the are the millions of people in the British nation who've always given me their trust and the kindnesses to which I refer. I hope, if you will forgive me, I will say no more this morning. I believe, as you know, I have an appointment with Her Majesty the Queen in a few moments to tender my resignation so that a new government may then be formally appointed. I propose to see Her Majesty in just a few moments. The second reason I'll say no more now is that after that I hope that Norma and I will be able, with the children, to get to the Oval in time for lunch and for some cricket this afternoon. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
What a characteristic final word from the Prime Minister. He's going to go and watch some cricket. And what a gracious statement, and what an important piece of political news he has just delivered to us. He said he is going to get off the stage. There's Ram Mawini behind him, the chairman of the party. He is going to leave the stage as soon as he can comfortably do it, and as soon as the party can allow him to do so. He is not going to stay on, as some of his backbench colleagues would like him to do. The battle for the leadership will be on very soon indeed. He said, too, bullishly, that he's bequeathed a benevolent inheritance to his successors, and he offered Tony Blair again warm congratulations. He now leaves Downing Street for the last time, turns out into Whitehall, and then he will go up to Buckingham Palace.